Hello and TGIF. Am I right, folks? Christian Finnegan is my guest today. We had a great conversation, recapped the week and news and more. And also, I am sorry I am late this morning with the show, but I was up with many of you hosting the stand-up happy hour hangout is what we call it. It was awesome. I will share a link for paid subscribers in today's email if you want to watch, listen to it, or rewatch it. And we were really happy to have Wisconsin Democrat running in the 10th Senate District, Paul Hambleton, joining us. He was a real interesting guy. Folks had lots of great questions for him. He was a great guest, and he joined as a subscriber, which is pretty cool. See how long we can keep Paul as part of our community, and you should go maybe send him a few bucks because we really need to win everywhere up and down the ballot, including, obviously, Wisconsin. All right, we'll get to Christian in a moment. Here are your headlines. I do this each and every day, Monday through Friday. I try to get the headlines and sound bites up. Let's start with, obviously, the big news about a huge hurricane. Helene slammed into Florida's Gulf Coast as a Category 4 storm with winds of up to 140 miles an hour, swallowing parts of Florida in a 9-foot storm surge. Lashed the entire region with heavy rain, has cut power for millions of people. Now in Georgia, where it's weakening to a tropical storm. I've heard from lots of you already that are okay, but definitely check in on Discord. People are wondering if you need anything. Let us know for sure. People across the Southeast continue to brace for the storm's arrival in the coming hours and days. So stay connected, stay in touch. And now let's go to the latest news on the election. The disgraced former president apparently still leads Kamala Harris on the economy, but her plans, including an 82-page booklet of housing, tax, and health care proposals, are shrinking that gap, some polls suggest. A nonpartisan analysis found that the disgraced former president's pledge to deport millions of undocumented immigrants and impose higher tariffs would destroy the economy and spur inflation. So you got to take all of it with a grain of salt because he's an absolute disgrace. Democrats now are planning to spend millions of dollars on this year's Senate races in Texas and in Florida. And on Debbie Mukersel-Powell's race, she was on this show yesterday, so we're a big deal. Both are long shots, but wins there would help Democrats hold their majority, of course. Now moving on to the Eric Adams indictment, which I talked with Christian about today. Federal prosecutors charged New York City's mayor with bribery, conspiracy, and fraud, soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations. Apparently he spent years accepting free airline tickets, lavish overseas accommodation, and illegal campaign donations from Turkey. According to prosecutors, in exchange, they said he pushed officials to approve a new Turkish consulate. And, of course, there's a lot more. Adams denied the charges, said he wouldn't quit at a press conference where hecklers called him a disgrace and chanted for him to resign. Now let's go to the federal government. The Biden administration plans to make it harder to lift its limits on asylum for undocumented or asylum-seeking refugees, which have reduced illegal border crossings. President Biden also signed executive orders meant to make school shooter drills less traumatic for students. Well, what? And to reduce the threat of so-called ghost guns. We'll take it. Any executive order on anti-gun violence is welcome. So a lot of organizations seeing this as a big win, or small win, if you will. The special counsel investigating the disgraced former president's efforts to overturn the election submitted a sealed briefing outlining Jack Smith's findings. The judge must now decide how much of it to make public, so we're chomping at the bit to find out if there's anything new in that. And the voting machine company Smartmatic settled its defamation suit against Newsmax, a right-wing channel that spread false claims about the 2020 election. The details of the settlement reached to this jury was being selected before trial were not immediately disclosed. Also, President Biden pledged another $8 billion in aid to Ukraine. I don't know how he can do that unilaterally, including bombs for F-16 fighters and another Patriot missile battery. The vice president, Kamala Harris, met with Volodymyr Zelensky, suggesting that Trump's plans to end the war were, quote, proposals for surrender. Trump is set to meet Zelensky today, apparently. U.S. intelligence is stressing the risk of allowing Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range Western missiles. Officials said it would likely bring retaliation without meaningful improving Kiev's chance of success. That's an interesting analysis. And other big stories around the world. World leaders urging a pause in fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Benjamin Netanyahu is going to speak today at the UN General Assembly. Finland returned 2 pandas to China 8 years before they were due back, citing high costs and low visitor traffic. Wow. High cost and low reward. Yikes. Pandas aren't really doing a good job in Finland. And U.S. colleges are reporting the racial makeup of their first post-affirmative action classes, but schools calculate the numbers in different ways. New York Times tries to explain making data why it's so hard to compare. Also, the FDA approved the first new treatment for schizophrenia in decades. So that's potential good news. All right, those are your headlines. Now to the sound I've got for you here on the Friday show. First of all, yesterday, Kamala Harris met with President Zelensky of Ukraine. And today, like I said, the disgraced former president met with him. And it was a stark contrast and difference. Here is Kamala Harris yesterday.
As I have made clear on our 6 previous meetings and throughout Putin's brutal aggression and war against Ukraine, my support for the people of Ukraine is unwavering. I've been proud to stand with Ukraine. I will continue to stand with Ukraine, and I will work to ensure Ukraine prevails in this war. To be safe, secure, and prosperous, the United States must continue to fulfill our long-standing role of global leadership. We must stand with our allies and our partners. We must defend our democratic values and stand up to aggressors. And we must stand for international order, rules, and norms. Each one of these principles is at stake in Ukraine. And that is why Ukraine's fight matters to the people of America.
And she went on to basically call out Trump.
Nothing about the end of this war can be decided without Ukraine. However, in candor, I share with you, Mr. President, there are some in my country who would instead force Ukraine to give up large parts of its sovereign territory, who would demand that Ukraine accept neutrality and would require Ukraine to forego security relationships with other nations. These proposals are the same of those of Putin. And let us be clear, they are not proposals for peace. Instead, they are proposals for surrender, which is dangerous and unacceptable.
That's Kamala Harris yesterday. And here this morning, it was the disgraced former president. Also, she was standing next to Zelensky during that statement. And now here is the disgraced former president with his take on it, while also standing right next to Zelensky, who just stares dead-faced off into the distance. And I'm sorry to have to play this 40 seconds of the disgraced former guy if you want to skip ahead.
He wants it to end, and he wants it to end as quickly as possible. He wants a fair transaction to take place. And I think, right now I'm campaigning, so right now I don't have much to do with it other than we're doing very well in terms of the campaign. And I've been saying that I believe if I win, we're going to have a very fair and I think actually rather rapid deal. It should stop, and the president wants it to stop. And I'm sure President Putin wants it to stop. And that's a good combination. So we want to have a fair deal for everybody.
What do you envision as fair?
Well, it's too early to say that.
That's it. Too early to say that. Doesn't have the balls to say all the shit that he's been saying to Zelensky. Maybe he did and I missed it, to be fair. But I'm pretty highly doubtful that he didn't, calling him the greatest salesman in the world for getting money from the rest of the world to fight our mutual enemy in Russia so that they don't keep invading countries and killing children and taking their land. Okay, well, I've run out of time and I want to get the show up. So let's wrap it up with a hilarious couple bits from Jimmy Kimmel, who was live on ABC last night.
Donald Trump, who is wrapping his comb over with cellophane tonight as Hurricane Helene makes her way toward Florida. Trump is said to be monitoring the storm from Mar-a-Lago and, if necessary, is prepared to move on Helene like a bitch. The storm is being tracked by the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service, both of which would be disbanded under Trump's Project 2025. They would get, for real, their solution to the hurricanes is, I'd rather not know. But today, Trump finally unveiled his plan for comprehensive health care reform. Just kidding. He unveiled more Trump brand crap to sell to his lemmings and a whole.
All right, there you go. Jimmy Kimmel on ABC last night. I guess Trump was selling watches or something. So there you have it. Of course he is. Now it's time to get to my guest here on a Friday. I love to talk to him, and I love to talk to him at the end of the week and anytime. Christian Finnegan is a hilarious comedian, commentator, and I think talking about culture and life and politics or just about anything, I always want to hear from him, and so many of you feel the same way. Have you subscribed to his Substack to support him? It's New Music for Olds, because you don't have time to discover new music, but Christian does. It's great. I love it. You should go read it. It's funny, it's fun, and you can always take great suggestions away from it. Christian, of course, you can follow on all the social media, watch his specials. He's one of my favorite stand-up comedians. You know him from VH1's Best Week Ever and The Chappelle Show and Are We There Yet? And so much more. Always happy when we get to catch up. Let's do it right now with Christian Finnegan. All right. Christian Finnegan joins me now. Lots of things to talk about with you. Thank you very much for joining me. Your mayor has been indicted under a number of charges, 5 federal public corruption charges, including bribery and wire fraud. Are you surprised?
No. I mean, first of all, hello. Lovely to speak to you again, Pete, after all this time.
Welcome to Anderson Cooper 360. We get right to it.
Yeah, I know. We got to get for the commercial break.
No spin zone, sir.
I would like a slight spin zone, like not no spin. Can we just have like light spin?
Good to see you. How have you been?
More of a twirl zone than a spin zone.
Fair enough. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I am great. I am not surprised at all by Eric Adams, and I base that mostly just on vibes and the fact that he was a cop, and it sounds just kind of knee-jerk anti-cop, but people, when they talk about defund the police or, things like that, they're usually referring to incidents of abuse, or abuse of power,
brutality,
injuring or killing. Yeah, brutality. Obviously people have probably heard the story about the fair jumper that, got the 4 people were shot.
Well, maybe not. I mean, and it might be worth mentioning just kind of the culture of that and punitive, and how New Yorkers feel about like shooting at someone who jumped a turnstile, much less stole a razor or something.
Yes. For people who don't know this story, because it's been a big deal here in New York, there was a kid or a person, I don't know how old the accused was, but he
young enough to jump a turnstile.
Yes, exactly. So definitely younger than me, younger and fitter than me. But he jumped a turnstile.
I heard you tried to jump a turnstile and went viral because you landed on your balls. And it didn't.
We keep getting further and further away from an actual topic, but I do have to say this one little anecdote really quick. One of my most cherished moments in my entire life. We were at Disney World. My older brother and my dad and I were at Disney World, and my older brother was being a dick about something and smacked me in the back of the head and then ran. There were these turnstiles and he put his hands on the turnstiles and he, when you were a kid, you would just sort of like push through a turnstile. Like you'd put your hands on the sides and kind of like, just get a running start, whatever. And it was the wrong way. And so he just buckled at the waist and just like totally boned himself on it. And it was my favorite moment of my childhood. Most of my childhood pleasant memories involve one of my other family members getting hurt or humiliated.
Yeah, well, I think everybody can relate to that. And that is the kind of thing that I'm surprised I haven't seen that actual act in a film. I think we need to shoot that at some point.
Yeah.
Recreate that for you. So getting back, that's hilarious. I'm glad you had a departure. Yeah. No, well, it's my fault.
Oh, so yeah. So anyway, so this kid, I'm assuming a kid or a young adult, jumped turnstile. The cops tried to arrest him. Apparently, he got on the train and then got off the train. And according to the police, came at them with a knife, which, okay, sure. I don't know why, if you were already on the train, you would then get off. And they shot at him and injured 4 people, one of whom is now brain dead. And another woman, the guy who there was a man who was they said in the police the NYPD press release, they said he was grazed by a bullet, in the head. And so he's now brain dead. And another woman who is like a serious.
It's more that bullet hit him in his brain, not as much grazed, which is the kind of PR spin that law enforcement uses after a shooting.
Exactly. Oh, and also this quote unquote knife that they said he had, they can't find it. Apparently, they said someone took it. Funny how that happens. And so anyway, what I began by saying is that a lot of times when people talk about the NYPD, they talk about the big stuff, which of course is more important. People getting brutalized or people getting murdered or, incarcerated, in under shady circumstances or whatever. But me, as sort of a middle-class white dude, my experience with the cops is very trivial, but it's very helpful for me in thinking about somebody like Eric Adams. We live right on the corner of this. There's a deli on the corner that's like a cop deli where they double park their squad cars outside and they go and they get their coffee and donuts or whatever. And so it's very hacky, but they get their pastries of various sorts. I don't want to assume they're all donuts, but they act with such impunity. They have this attitude of just like mobsters in a neighborhood of like, we run this and we will just sort of vaguely threaten people around us by acting like we just own the joint, and there's just a vibe that they give off. And that's always the vibe I've gotten from Eric Adams. It's just the rules don't apply to me. I remember once there was a car double parked outside and a squad car or non-cop car double parked outside this deli. And the squad car came up behind them and put on the sirens. And then with the intercom said, you got to move. It's, you're parked illegally. And so the car pulled away so that then the cop car could then double park there and go in. So basically it's like, you're in our parking spot. We own that. And that sounds petty. And of course it is petty, but it's that sort of idea that the rules don't apply to me, that, I act with impunity and everybody else just has to take it. And you put that sort of energy in the mayor's, in City Hall, or at the time, I guess a lot of this malfeasance was going on when he was Brooklyn Borough president. It was like 10 years ago. That's what you get. You get just sort of low level, dumb corruption, of people, some of the things that he's accused of. And there is a very extensive text, a lot of texts to back this up, which is really dumb, low level shakedowns of foreign governments or accepting bribes and, free airfare and money to his campaign funneled through American citizens, like comically obvious, comically corrupt. And, we're entering this phase now. And, I know we were going to talk a little bit about Mark Robinson as well. Somebody brought this up in connection with Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, is that we're entering this phase now where a lot of people who were kind of really online a lot in the early aughts, or in the early 21st century, before people really knew how to cover their tracks, are now in positions of power. And the next 10 years is going to be really fucking fascinating. Think about how careful you are with your data now compared to the way you were in 2005, or just the things you're aware of now, like incognito mode, stuff as simple as that. You know what I mean? And so I think we're about to enter a golden age of, oh my God, look at what the person posted on this message board in 2007.
If they revealed your porn viewing, but who's writing messages on the porn site under their name and all kinds of other obviously terrible things that they were saying in those messages. But if it's just like porn viewing, like I'm not slamming the guy for watching porn, right?
No, I think there's kind of nobody wants to say it out loud, but I think there's sort of an unspoken agreement that like what you're actually looking at, provided it's not like involving animals or violence or children, do what you want to do. We're all adults, live your life. But once you're actually like, first of all, anyone who spent any time on a porn site of any sort, and I, purely for research, I have, but I think we've all wondered why a comment section existed, right. Period. I don't go to Pornhub for community. I don't think like these are my people. It's never, like, let's see how many likes I got on my.
I'd forgive you. I would just say maybe don't make your screen name Christian Finna 2 and then say horribly anti-Semitic or racist things. That's all I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also, or if you are going to write horribly anti-Semitic or racist things, pick a different screen name than the one you use for Etsy or,
right.
your local WFAN call-in account or whatever, like diversify your commenter
Etsy was
status.
the funniest possible choice for that, by the way. Just didn't even need to go further, but for sure. Yeah. So we're talking about both these guys, Mayor Adams and Mark Robinson, just finishing up.
Yeah. And just to make the reason I made that connection is just that, like, the level of carelessness with online communications. Yeah. We've gone from like Goodfellas, where Polly wouldn't talk, would never use the phone, to now, criminals are basically just leaving a snail trail of their corruption for anybody to find. It's like, it's got to be, being a forensic investigator, it's got to be so easy when it comes to, looking up stuff from year 2000 to the year 2020, say. Like, it's all there. I will
leave the racial components with Mayor Adams for other people to discuss. I just will say, during his press conference, there were a lot of prominent black pillars of the community who've been supporting him probably all of his career, standing behind him, talking. He's clearly not resigning today. And then there were other black folks screaming at him, one of which said, "This is not a black thing. This is a you thing." Also, the prosecutor in this case from the Department of Justice is a black guy. Not sure if that matters or changes anything, and we'll leave that conversation to others. And just the idea that DOJ went after him. Do other people commit these types of crimes and they don't go after him, and so on? But any other thoughts on Mayor Adams and his tenure, the election? Or this hurts New Yorkers, no doubt. It's not good for the city.
I don't know that it hurts New Yorkers. I really don't. I think what people maybe don't understand about New York politics, New York City and New York State politics, is because it is such a blue state, or it is a, reliably blue state, quote unquote, reliably blue. A lot of Republicans, just straight up fucking Republicans, run as Democrats. And a lot of the sort of cafe society Republican New Yorkers, the money people, the, Wall Street people, the Madison Avenue people, will support those quote unquote Democrats because they're kind of Republicans too. And what they really want is a Republican with a D in front of his name. Like, that's really what they're looking for. And so, I think a lot of people who they just go to vote and they vote along party lines. They're busy people. I'm not slamming them. They don't have time to read the minutia. They just say, "Oh, who's the Democrat? I'm going to vote for the Democrat." And little do they know that Democrat is is really being supported by the, some shady types. And
really
so,
good point. Yeah.
Yes, it's not great for New York, but it's like, you look online, liberals are delighted by this. And the only people really defending him, or the people who look really stupid, are all the Brett Stevens types who were singing his praise when he was elected. It's like, oh, this is the path forward for Democrats. Brett Stevens wrote an op-ed in either New York Times, I think it was New York Times, basically saying that he was a godsend for Democrats because he's a Democrat, but he's tough on crime and he's a cop and he's all these like things that Republicans love. It's like, yeah, I get it. These are the same people who want Kamala Harris to basically become a Republican to convince them to leave Trump. I just think that there's a very marked difference in the way liberals are reacting to this, to the way you would think if you just saw, a Democratic mayor was indicted. You would think, oh my God, Democrats must be in a real shitstorm about this. No, we're pretty fine with it.
Really interesting perspective. Also, apparently you think that this trouble that he's found himself in is a chilling reminder of what happens when you go vegan, that you think there's a correlation?
Yes, absolutely. I should say that, he is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of things. You don't think of former cops and veganism as going hand in hand. So I will give him credit for bringing something new to the game. And he has, if you see old footage of him compared to now, he is in much better shape now. And he looks, I've always honestly thought he had good personal style, and I admire his level of fitness. Being mayor of New York is not, it's not a 9-to-5 job. To be able to keep up that sort of musculature. I give him credit for that. I don't know why I don't
think he gets any credit. I don't think
sweating all of a sudden.
That's how he copes. So,
but yeah, no, he is a vegan, and this just goes to show you that when you without an occasional pork chop or rotisserie chicken, These are the sort of
I think there's a lot of evidence of that also, but you do personally lose because apparently you had invested in a few thousand Eric Adams 2025 t-shirts. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I got swept away and all these people saying, Nate Silver said that he was going to be, he was in his top 5 people to replace or to be the next nominee after Joe Biden. That's what I'm saying. All of these quote unquote centrists who really, it's like they don't want a liberal, but they also want to be able to go to cocktail parties. Like they want that nothing candidate. They want that candidate who's neither Republican nor Democrat, who operates like a Republican but speaks like a Democrat. That's really what they want. And so he was an empty vessel for a lot of these sort of centrist pundit dudes to sort of throw their hopes into. And it would be very easy to have, to thought that like, oh my God, we may be looking at the next governor or senator or president, and so, yeah, I invested in a lot of Eric Adams merch, and now
you can help make him whole, folks. Subscribe to the Substack, New Music for Olds, right now to help him. Yeah.
Yes.
Now we love to do this segment whenever you're here, and we haven't talked to you in a few weeks. It's called State of the Race with Christian Finnegan, where Christian takes a large...
I know a special effects guy, an audio guy who could make so you didn't have to...
Of the Race! With Christian Finnegan, where he takes a long view of the current state of the race with just about 40 days left until Election Day. Kamala Harris is surging. She's barnstorming the swing states. She's got a big campaign operation, spending lots of money, hiring lots of people. And Trump seemingly is no longer campaigning or hiring campaign staff. He's just trying to create a narrative that he's going to lose, and that it's because the Democrats flew brown people in, and the whole thing's rigged. He doesn't care if he wins. That's what he seems to be. But what do you think? State of the race.
I don't. I wish I was as sunny as you are. I'm still relatively sunny. I feel if I had to bet money, I would bet on Kamala Harris. But honestly, what the last few weeks has shown me is just that people aren't listening. They've made up their mind, and they just like the fact that Trump can have had as awful a month as he's had. Between the debate and between this Mark Robinson stuff and between, the 50,000 idiotic things, the dogs and the cats, all of that shit, you would think that it would have more of an electoral dent, that there is just a core group of people that is shockingly and depressingly large that have just made up their mind that they're going to support him no matter what. And so it's really... Kamala Harris has growth potential that he doesn't have, which I appreciate. There are still people out there who I don't think that she's necessarily going to win over any Trump voters at this point, but there's a lot of people who might not vote, who she could convince to vote, I think. And so I think that she has room to grow, and that gives me a lot of faith. But it has been really kind of depressing and disheartening to see the lack of movement in the polls. And I know that polls are polls, and who gives a shit? And they really, at the end of the day, they don't mean a whole lot because they can't predict turnout and things like that. But, I hate it. But when her margin is going up, I'm in a good mood. And when it's going down, I get all tetchy.
You are us. Although I try to put it right into the work. And I know you've done stuff to raise money for the campaign, and that's how I kind of channel it in. All right. Finally, I want to ask you this. We always love to do this whenever Christian's here. We talk about a story you've been paying a disproportionate amount of attention to. Maybe it's not as important, but just generally, we talk about important stories here on the show, and even with you. You always teach me something, and we love your perspective. So it's time to play Christian's Obsession. This week, you're obsessed with the story.
I love that you're branding these segments as if they're like crowd favorites. Like you've never said Christian's Obsession before. You made it sound like it was this long running bit.
We always do it. We always do it.
Yeah, but I never heard you say like Christian's Obsession. That's very
listening to some of the. We put a lot of work into these promos, and apparently you just plow right through them, and then you make fun of them when we do them. Whatever, they say branding is good for segments. Okay.
Christian's branding is everything.
Obsession. So It's the story about New York Magazine's reporter Olivia Nuzzi and her online digital affair she was having with a candidate she was covering, RFK Jr. What was your initial response to this? What do you think are the most important takeaways? And I really I know that you're very obsessed with this.
Well, I mean, of course, I'm way too online and I'm way too Twitter obsessed. And so it's very telling to me about the state of big journalism, and I've had so many issues with the way they have reacted to Harris's candidacy with, all this, like, she needs to do more interviews and, she needs to talk to, this big time journalist and do this show. And it's like, okay, so these are the people that are the arbiters. Like these are the person whose judgment is such that she sent nudes to a running like a current presidential candidate. And, and I understand that there might be some people who get a little touchy at the idea of touching on a woman's conduct when, that it can very easily drift into misogyny. I totally understand that. But give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking break. Like if you don't know that this is an ethical no-no, I don't even know what to tell you. And like, these are the people who have the most access. These are people who literally can get Donald Trump on the phone in 10 minutes if they really wanted to. And a lot of them have become so spoiled over the past 8 years because Trump, who is just basically a fire hose, he's a fire hose of narcissism. And there's nothing he wants more in the world than to talk to journalists. For as much as he talks about the lying media or whatever terms he wants to use, crooked media, it's all he wants to do is be interviewed. That's all he wants to do is just talk. And I think so many of the sort of legacy media types have kind of gotten really spoiled and lazy that they are just owed news, like that they shouldn't have to dig. They shouldn't have to analyze. They shouldn't have to read policy papers. It's like, no, serve us our sound bites, please. I need to have an op-ed written by tomorrow. So please serve me up a premise the way Trump does, because Trump is just a content factory constantly. And it's just, to me, it's just the elite narcissism of these people, the Brett Stevenses of the world, the Jonathan Chaits, the David Brookses, all these people who just sort of feel that it is their job to determine what our national conversation is. And so when you see something like this Olivia Nuzzi thing, it really brings home the fact that, like, these are not super smart people, or their judgment is not apolitical or reasoned, and they're not King Solomon holding court over our national conversation. They're dummies looking to promote themselves and to promote their own personal brand above all. People say, like, oh, Olivia Nuzzi is, she's a MAGA. They say the same thing about Maggie Haberman, or they say the same thing about Andrea Mitchell or whomever. And I find a lot of those, and I hate that I just mentioned 3 women. I pick your legacy journalist. They're not Trumpers. Like Olivia Nuzzi is not a Republican. She's not a Democrat. She is a Nuzziist. She is a person who wants to be in control of the conversation. And I'm not singling her out. I think it's a very common thing among that class of journalism. And again, I think that they take particular glee in punching left, because those are their readers. That's how they get hate clicks. It's like, people are like, why don't they ever question Republicans about this? Well, because the Republicans aren't reading those people anyway. They're not. Yeah. There's no juice. I can think of a lot of people that squeeze.
Michael Smerconish, Don Lemon. I'll name the names probably all day of people who I think are Lemonish or Smerconish. They're about their own career and promoting that first and foremost. And you always have to think about your career and working and advocating for yourself. But what if working and talking about what's in the public's interest was the primary objective more than anything else? Or what if you were,
where does your brain go when those things are in conflict? Right. What wins? Right. What wins at the end of the day, between.
Yeah. And then when the opportunity to breach your own integrity and ethics, comes your way, which is inevitable that it will. what do you do? I mean, you and I have both been there a lot of times. We were just talking about it before we hit record about, should I do this or should I not do this kind of a thing? Because we care about what each other thinks, much less what other people who we've never met think, because your integrity and your credibility matter. But in this case,
and also, what do you think when you're lying in bed at night about yourself? Like, what do you think about the choices you're making? And can you live in a state of cognitive dissonance? I've been doing this, bit on stage just about, and I think I mentioned it on this show, is that I started taking Prozac, and it was like, they say that it takes like 6 weeks for Prozac for you to feel anything. And literally the first day I took it, 4 hours later, Biden dropped out of the race. And it was like and it was just like, oh my God, it's working. And like now I do wonder, is it the Prozac or is it, whatever? What were we talking about that made me even say this?
Olivia Nuzzi's integrity, journalistic integrity.
Yeah, I don't remember what got me down the topic of my mental state. But also, I find it very interesting watching all of these other media people either stick up for her blatantly or sort of try to poo-poo the fact that this is a big deal. And how I read that is these are people talking to each other in public. They're not really even talking to the general. Like when the people come out and be like, oh, I've worked with Olivia Nuzzi for years and years. They're doing that to protect their own reputations for people that might be future coworkers or bosses. That they're talking to like 50 people. They're not really talking to the public at large. They're trying to make it less awkward at the Christmas party. They're not doing anything to serve the sort of public interest or whatever. And I think that people also have to understand that the news industry is an industry like any other. That, especially when you're talking about the sort of big legacy corporation, news corporations.
And not only for profit. I mean, that's the difference when you can argue about the integrity that you need to maintain to just make $100,000 or $200,000 a year with your Substack or your Patreon, something that you could live off of versus, or barely live off of, versus the millions, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that CNN or the New York Times need to make, and the compromises that need to be made to please all of those people. There's a really, I think, interesting conversation to have about that. It's also obviously problematic for obvious reasons that we get siloed into these channels, of course. But you seemingly are scapegoating Olivia Nuzzi and letting RFK Jr. off the hook, which was my initial response was, why are we talking so much about her and not him?
Well, for me, I can only speak personally. RFK Jr. being a shameless and ethics-free douche was not in debate. And again, honestly, and maybe in a way, what I'm doing right now is what I accuse the media of doing, is I'm going after the target that has more electricity to it and ignoring the other target, because there's nothing to be gained for me, at least in my mind. Like in terms of these, what I spend my time thinking about, it's like, oh man, I pretty much had made up my mind about RFK Jr. to begin with. There's nothing super surprising about that. I mean, he kept a list of women he had cheated on his wife with.
But here's the difference. Here's my pushback to that. He's got so much more impact on the country than she does. Everything you said is true about her and journalism in general, I think. But he's endorsed Donald Trump. He could be a future secretary of the FDA. And yes, we know you're not surprised that he's a creep, but I do think it's important that he's now married, because of his past, to a well-known, respected actress, in some circles at least. And now we know he's not reformed because of this. He participated in this. So I feel like
in his defense, if you listen to him, he was desperately trying to avoid this barrage of nude pictures coming his way. Like, I love that they're now trying to paint her as if she's Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. I'm sure that she was just bombarding him with nude photos, and he was like, please leave me alone. And somebody else brought up, this is not me, somebody else, I don't even remember who said it. It's hilarious to me that Ryan Lizza, who was another one of these sort of big mainstream journalists, left his wife for someone, he's 50, left his wife for Olivia Nuzzi, who's 20 years younger than him, who then cheated on him with a guy 20 years older than him. Like, he's 50, left his wife for a 31-year-old, and she cheated on him with a 70-year-old. Like, there's something really...
why we haven't heard more from Ryan Lizza's first wife about all of this coming back.
I know, man. Oh boy. We got to wonder if there's an NDA or something there because, I'm sure she would have some things to say.
Well, all good, man. I love getting your view on all of these things. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before I let you go that's happening in the world that's impactful or in your life even? That you're watching? Can't do sports. I can't do music or TV or comedy. I mean,
just give yourself some grace over the next 5 weeks to 6 weeks, however long it is before the election. To if you're not doing your hobbies, try, go for a walk, do things, be good to yourself, but don't punish yourself. If you find yourself spending way too much time on social media or reading the news, just accept that this is what it is. I'm mostly talking to myself right now, but it's going to be a real tense 5 or 6 weeks, and you're not alone if you're kind of dreading it or anticipating it, or if it's feeling like it's taking up too much of your life. If you're slightly ignoring other things in your life right now, you're not alone. That's all I would say. Love it. Yeah, and you might be trying to save the planet, the future, and democracy itself. So yeah, I mean, this shit matters. So thank you, buddy. Much appreciated. I love that. Thanks, dude. All right. Yeah. What do you think? Let him know if you loved Christian, and hopefully we'll get him back. I'm thinking about trying to go live every week and having him and others as a part of the cast on YouTube and other platforms. I was talking about him with that. Hopefully I can make that work soon, because that's something I've always wanted to get back to, is live. Thanks so much for your support this week. Look for new shows to drop over the weekend, and have a great autumn weekend, your first. And I look forward to hearing from you. You're never alone if you're a member of the stand-up community. You can always go and chat and connect in the Discord platform. If you haven't, check that out. If you're a subscriber, at the bottom of the email, it tells you how to do that if you don't know. All right. Jon Carroll writes and performs the music for this show. All of it. JonCarroll.org. Go support him. My bumblebees, I love you. I'll talk to you later.
Stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. Stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. Alright, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. voice to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Oh, got to stand up. Oh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand